It's like Marshall Auto Wreckers and pay them and say, can I knock, mirrors off of a car if you need to get your
On that note, we will get started. Welcome to City Council meeting for Tuesday, February 27th, and welcome everyone to this brisk day. We'll start off with the Oh, I'm going to flip through my agenda here for a roll call, Madam City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. Councillor Carlson. I see
Present.
one. Thank you. Councillor Croson.
Present.
Councillor Dodick. Present. Councillor Palladino.
Present.
Councillor Parker.
Here.
Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. She's absent today. Acting Mayor Middleton Hope.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Campbell.
Present.
And Mayor Higgin.
Present.
Thank you. We have 8 of 9.
All right. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we're gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. I'll start off with recognitions. I don't know where I want to start when I look over at this guy. All right, Acting Mayor Middleton Hope, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I wanted to congratulate you on your choice of attire for the day. This is yet another of our series of Calgary and Edmonton wagers, and we make good fun of it, and I appreciate you wearing the Flames jersey today. We also had a pretty good evening out on, what was it, first cold night? Yep, on Saturday, both downtown with Streets Alive, as well as Wood Center out at the Nikko-Yuko Japanese Garden, and it wasn't too cold. So,
Thank you for that. Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. Just a reminder for everybody, tomorrow is Pink Shirt Day, so anti-bullying day. So if you have a pink shirt in your closet, make sure you pull it out for tomorrow. I know several of us, the mayor and Councillor Schmidt-Rempel and I, were able to attend the Southern Alberta Chinese Association's Year of the Dragon Spring Festival. It was an amazing event. There have also been a series of spelling bees at the Lethbridge Public Library. I know Councillor Parker attended one. I was at the most recent, which was the adult spelling bee. It was incredible how very, very good the spellers were. I was the pronouncer, and I was glad I had the words in front of me, because pronouncing them was hard enough, never mind spelling them. So, well, I check things on my phone. Congratulations to everyone who was part of that, and I think they'll be doing it next year if anybody here wishes to compete. And just a reminder that next week, March 8th, International Women's Day, the Chamber has the breakfast, and there is the YWCA Women of Distinction in the evening. Not all the winners have been announced, so once we know who those are, we'll, of course, be doing an announcement there. And also on that day, the college and many of the school districts are involved in the Collaborative Opportunities in Trades Education next Friday. So if you have an opportunity to go and see what they're doing at the college, I hope everyone will.
Thank you. Councillor Palladino.
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Parker. Councillor Dodick.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, thank you. Last week I attended for the first time at the Lethbridge Agri-Food and Hub Center the first monthly bullfighting event that has occurred, and there was a number of matadors and bulls, so it was a new experience for us. Next week we start with rooster fighting at the same center. I'm just kidding.
And with that, we'll move on to Deputy Mayor Campbell.
So that was sarcasm. Anyway, for me, I want to shout out to an example of our diverse community here in Lethbridge. I was able to attend a great event on Saturday night at the Galt Museum with BIPOC, which is a nonprofit organization that was created to support Black, Indigenous, and people of color entrepreneurs. And they all strive to create success stories for new businesses, but also they stand united against systematic racism and discrimination. It was just really great to be there, and a real energetic evening. So thanks to them. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of mine have been said. I just want to thank our entire community that came out to support our for the If Music Be the Food of Love fundraiser. We raised nearly $5,500 and a whole lot of food donations came in. And so just a reminder to folks that after the holiday season, things are always tight for our food banks. We have 3 in our community that could always use your help and donations. So thank you all for those who came out. And also a big thank you, or a big congratulations to New West Theatre, who just closed their latest production of Legends of Rock and Country. I was blown away, and I brought some guests from out of town. And the first thing they said about 2 songs in, they grabbed the program and they said, "Holy moly, almost this entire cast of talent is born and raised in your community. What's in the water?" So they were just excited to see Lethbridge have such amazing talent. And again, bring any guests you have down to our community from out of town, because they're always blown away by our community. So congratulations to New West on a great show.
Thank you. You've got a standing ovation from Mr. Kaup, our water individual, out in the gallery. So thanks so much for that. Pretty much everything has been covered here. The coldest night, as well as on Saturday. Thank you very much for attending the BIPOC. It's great to have council right attentive to hop to some of these different events that I'll get invited to, and so thank you for doing that for me, Deputy Mayor. Also, while you were at BIPOC, I had the opportunity of attending the International Peace Powwow at the NMAX. And if you've never had the opportunity, I would encourage you all to get to the next powwow. It was just absolutely amazing. The regalia that was on display there was second to none. They also had crowning of some different princes and princesses at the event, and it was absolutely amazing. Touch base on the Lethbridge shelter expansion. I know that is brought up here as of yet, but I guess it's been a couple weeks ago that the expansion, there was $4 million that came from the provincial government to our community-based organization, which is Lethbridge Housing Authority, and they're doing the expansion of the shelter. Our part in that, obviously, as we've already done, was to pass on the building and to give the building as our contribution to this cause. And so now this will run through the province and their community-based organization, which is Lethbridge Housing. And so that expansion will be able to help those are struggling in our community and those most vulnerable. So that's great to see that, and that'll be, my understanding, happening very quickly and getting construction on that. Spelling Bee, thank you for bringing that up. You had the adults and we had the mids, and I had the younger kids that were in there with the Spelling Bee. The winner spelled the word batteries, and this is from a grade 3 student, I believe, which was just absolutely amazing. And so it was very happy. A nice big trophy. These types of events are great, and it was great to be able to see some of those words that were out there and some young talent that we have within our community. So with that, I will touch base a little on this jersey. It's really hurting me now to be wearing, quite literally, but I will keep it on for a little bit to be the sport. So thank you for that. We do have one more game, by the way, before the season wraps up. So, all right. So I have a resolution from Acting Mayor Middleton Hope, the adoption of the agenda. Be it resolved, the agenda of the regular meeting of City Council on February 27th, 2024 be adopted as presented. Are there any changes, Madam City Clerk?
Yes, Mayor. We have 3 additions to today's agenda. They are all closed meeting verbal updates. 14.3, Lethbridge and District Exhibition Update. 14.4, Shelter Update. 14.5, Federation of Canadian Municipalities 2024 Conference Update. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Mayor.
Yep. If there's nothing else, then we'll call a question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Yeah. Thank you. All right, get your popcorn, sit back. This is quite a few pages, and if it's all right with my colleagues, I will, I'm sure all you've went through the consent agenda as well as it is posted in the public agenda as well online. So if you're okay, I will just read the resolution, and if there's any questions on that or if anything wants to be pulled out of that, then I would expect that someone will speak to that. So Moved by Deputy Mayor Campbell, the consent agenda be it resolved that the minutes of the following meeting of City Council be approved and the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign the same. And that's with the City Council meeting 2024-02-13. And further be resolved that City Council receive the information, the status of directed resolutions for 2024-02-27. And further be resolved that City Council approve the recommendations contained within the following Standing Policy Committee reports, which I will not go through all of them unless somebody does want me to do so. Oh, they're on the screen there now. Thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to, to Deputy Mayor Campbell.
Yes, I'm just saying if there's, unless anybody wants to pull anything from the consent agenda, then I would call for the vote.
All right. I see none. So with that, the question's been called. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. I have an official business motion from Councillor Dodick, timing of proposed amendments to the land use bylaw 6.1. Whereas administration was previously directed by City Council to return by the end of Q1 2024 with legal and other considerations, as well as proposed Phase 1 amendments to the land use bylaw regarding shelter, supportive housing, and other related social uses, with options to be explored, including making them permitted uses with required criteria such as buffer distances from schools and playgrounds, and exploring allowing them in more land use districts within the land use bylaw. And last, public engagement prior to holding public hearings will be undertaken in drafting these proposed amendments. And whereas regulation of such social uses of land needs to be carefully considered, and whereas it is important for the community to have timely knowledge of any proposed zoning changes that may affect them and to allow them the opportunity to have input regarding any proposals that may be made. And whereas the overall land use bylaw renewal project is comprised of 4 phases. Phase 1, which is near completion, and phases 2, 3, and 4, which are to be completed from 2024 to 2026. And whereas it would be more beneficial for council and the community to review proposed amendments to the land use bylaw and consider the options and implications as a complete package. Therefore, be it resolved that City Council refer first reading of the proposed Phase 1 amendments to Land Use Bylaw 6300, Item 7.1, on the February 27th, 2024 agenda to administration for incorporation into the new proposed land use bylaw to be presented for Council's consideration Q2 2026 or as soon as possible thereafter. And with that, I will open it up for questions. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. I do have a couple of questions. This is a 2-year delay, if I'm on the right page here. How would a 2-year delay affect our ability with social housing grants? So that'd be a question I would be asking administration.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Essentially a 2-year or as much as 2.5-year delay to this would mean that essentially we stuck with the current status quo rules for that time, unless anything else changed in that time. So what we've seen in the past few years is that it's been very hard to get approvals for some uses, such as supportive housing, where most of them have been turned down for either rezonings or development permits or overturned on appeal. So we could expect that to potentially continue, which could impact organisations applying for grants and so on to bring investment into the community for those types of housing.
One of the concerns expressed in the motion was that we haven't had a fulsome conversation with the public, that they weren't aware of it. Can you walk me through your process? What organizations have you spoken with? What information have they received? Has the public been involved in the process to this point?
Thank you for the question. So the engagement strategy was assigned to engage as many stakeholders as we could that are, this includes impacted individuals. We also delivered the engagement in a way that we were doing the actions, so we were going to the public and stakeholders instead of expecting them to come to us. The engagement strategy was also designed as a bit of a journey that every participant would come along with us on. This includes building a survey that gathered general perspectives, hosting workshops where solutions were identified by service providers and interested stakeholders and members of the public. And then we followed up with an open house where we provided draft recommendations. All of this was also paired with the information that phase 1 concluded in a public hearing. And so the public has been well aware that the process we've been delivering really ends in this room with City Council reviewing the final draft of recommendations that the public stakeholders have helped us develop. And again, the public hearing has been described to everyone interested as another opportunity for engagement, where planning and design would present the recommendations we're putting forward in the form of a bylaw. The public would have a chance to present their perspectives and positions on the bylaw, and council would be able to ask questions of us and the public to be able to advise administration on how to move forward. And so the communication has been there from the beginning that this concludes through a legislative process that includes the public hearing.
Okay, so just sort of to summarize that, I'm sorry, Mr. Kilgore, did you have something to add?
I could just add for summary, so there is a full list of organisations that we spoke to in the submission report for first reading, but essentially it was a wide range of organisations from LPS to social service providers to the general public, AHS, food banks, and so on.
Okay, and so just to kind of wrap all that up, if this motion is does not go through and we go to first reading, what would be the process afterwards? Would the public have even more opportunity to be engaged?
We would, again, seek direction from you on what you expect us to deliver. I will note that this topic has been part of the community and brought to council in different projects. So we have the municipal housing strategy, the shelter development strategy, we have the land use bylaw project, and this we have to consider engagement fatigue. And engagement fatigue is the idea that when we re-engage on a topic, sometimes without action and without change, we do have a difficult time re-engaging again. So that's also something to consider. One point of feedback that we received in a not part of the questionnaire that we had for workshops or surveys was that people had a sentiment of frustration that change wasn't being done, and they were hopeful that this land use bylaw would result in changes. And so that is attributed to engagement fatigue, and it's something we need to consider. And we would have to adapt our future engagement to factor that in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Higgin. I'll step out at this time.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Dodick.
Yes, actually, following up on exactly both those questions, I have to admit that I was a little bit insulted in reading the report by reading a phrase like virtually all social issues in Lethbridge are only allowed as discretionary uses, which means that their approval is not guaranteed, and even if approval is granted, they are subject to appeal, which frequently results in approval being overturned. Now, as you go through the report, it becomes clear to me that grants are not jeopardized by the land use bylaw as constituted now in terms of whether something is permitted or discretionary. What is affected is if something is a discretionary use, it's granted, and then it comes to council. So what you're seeking is really more permitted use in a host of social areas to take away from the public the opportunity to actually be able to appeal. Is it not fair to say, or is it not correct to say that once you make it a permitted use, that's in the discretion of the development officer and it ends there? Is that not fair?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So if something's a permitted use, there wouldn't be any discretion for the development officer. If it met the regulations in the land use bylaw, it must by law be approved. So effectively the decision to approve that is made by council when you approve the bylaw that establishes that as a permitted use.
Okay, that was a long way of answering that. In fact, council has no say in a development officer allowing a development permit if it's a permitted use.
The say that council has is in passing the bylaw to make it a permitted use.
I
So-
understand that. Is what we've got here, going into partly in debate, is that the resolution talked about shelter, supportive housing, and other related social uses. So we have two identified shelter and supported housing, and this is my own fault because I authored a resolution I presented a resolution which I hadn't authored. And if I knew that other related social uses also included supervised consumption sites, drop-in centers, food banks, group homes, resource centers, soup kitchens, and seniors housing, I would have been a little bit more precise. Now, getting back to the question is, if this bylaw were to be passed after the public hearing, there would be a host of social uses that would come under the category of permitted uses, which means council no longer had any discretion. It was solely in the discretion of the development officer. Am I not correct?
I would say you're mostly correct, councillor, other than the fact that a development officer really doesn't have any discretion if it's a permitted use.
That's what I'm saying, is if it's a permitted use, the development officer has to say as to whether yes or no.
As to whether or not it meets the regulations in the land use bylaw, that's right.
Okay.
One thing I would add is that you mentioned about supervised consumption sites. So currently, that would fall under the existing use definition of medical and health facility, inpatient, outpatient, which is typically used for a hospital. So that is a permitted use currently in the public building district, which is widely used across the city for things like schools, religious assembly buildings, hospitals, and so on. So this bylaw actually proposes to create supervised consumption site as its own distinct use, which would not be allowed in any standard land use district.
Okay, but the resolution doesn't even talk about supervised consumption site, does it?
It does not, no. It was probably the main concern we heard from people through all of our engagement, and so we've addressed that through this bylaw. So if this bylaw was passed, it would heavily restrict supervised consumption sites compared to today.
But would you not agree with me, and like I said, it's my own fault. Wouldn't it have been clearer to the public if the initial resolution that started this whole process said, well, regarding shelter, supporting houses, supervised consumption site, drop-in center, food banks, group home, resort center, soup kitchens, and seniors housing. So everyone who's reading that resolution would know exactly what was going to be considered in terms of what is going to be included in a proposed bylaw. Would you at least agree with me on that point?
The impression I get from having worked through all this engagement is that many thousands of people have heard about this list of uses through the engagement on this project. Probably many more than heard about that original motion.
Okay. That actually segues nicely into the second question that my colleague had asked. So this is the phrasing you use in terms of the consultation. And it says, planning and design staff made intentional and extensive efforts to involve the public and other interested stakeholders in the process through wide-ranging and meaningful engagement. Now, if Dr. Farron Ellis were sitting at the table here as a statistician, he would be talking about the concepts of reliability and validity in terms of, for example, polling. Validity being, does it actually measure what it purports to measure? And reliability is, if you conduct the same test over a period of time, how many times would you get the same answers? And that's where they talk about 95 and 95% reliability. The consultation that took place was not a consultation that would be necessarily valid and reliable in the same way that phrase would be used by those who do statistical analysis, statisticians. Would you agree with me on that?
Thank you for the question. The engagement planning and design delivers is mostly qualitative. So to answer your question, no, what you've described is quantitative. The City of Lethbridge has an engagement bylaw that specifies that we need to deliver engagement as per the IAP2 engagement spectrum. And on that spectrum, there are several levels. The highest level of engagement is empowering, and you, as decision makers, are the only ones who we engage at that level. The lower level is collaborate, which is the level we reached with stakeholders. So it is my professional opinion that we did conduct meaningful and thoughtful engagement as per the City of Lethbridge engagement bylaw.
Exactly. So the point is that City Council set the rules how to do qualitative engagements, not necessarily quantitative, as you had indicated. So we set the rules, you followed those rules. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're valid or reliable in terms of what they're purporting to be measuring. Is that not correct?
It does align with best practices in the planning field across municipalities.
Yet when we do, when we want someone to conduct a survey of the city, satisfaction survey, we hire professional pollsters, and they make it very clear, and they talk about quantitative analysis with respect to validity and reliability. Is that not fair to say?
That is something planning and design would pursue if we were directed to do so.
I understand that. No, my question was that when we do hire external pollsters, they're interested in the quantitative approach, in which case validity and reliability are big components of that.
I can't confirm that. I haven't been on a project that has delivered that work.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I can't confirm that. I have not been on a project that has delivered that work.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Councillor Middleton-Ho.
Most eloquent. I have two questions, but they really kind of move into the debate component. But I'll just preface this one question. It'll go to the city manager. I think what we're trying to do with this was we're trying to avoid a piecemeal approach to the land use bylaw. In recognizing this, as this is a public policy priority, are we able to move up the time frame from Q2 26 to Q3 2025, which would allow this council to deal with the new bylaw during this term, rather than putting it onto a brand new council in the early part of 2026, which has the very real possibility, not probability, but has a very real possibility of being delayed later in the year. So is this possible to be able to move it up about 6 months?
Through the mayor, in the discussion with staff, and I'll look to the city solicitor and the planning staff, my understanding of the work that's required and so forth, that if we wanted to do both of those, I don't think that that's doable. In fact, the 2026 dates, as I understand it, are potentially a challenge. Is that correct, Mr. Lowen, or other stuff?
I defer to my planning colleagues to talk about the work required for engagement around the entire rewrite of the land use bylaw, but even from its conception, this project wasn't expected to bring anything back in this term and would require a significant retooling and reprioritization of other projects to be able to meet the timeline suggested by the councillor. But I know that the planning department will have more to say on the planning side of it.
How many years have we been involved in doing this review? Has it been 2?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So the approval through the budget initiative was November 2022. The project was started internally right after that and launched publicly last August.
So about 18 months then?
About 15 months or so.
Okay. And so we're asking for another 2.5 years to get this done?
So with the current plan, we're planning to engage extensively again in phase 2, which would run through most of this year, and then we would come back to council at the end of this year with our findings from that engagement on essentially everything else but social uses. We would look to get some buy-in from council at that point in terms of the direction we wanted to take the new land use bylaw in, so that we had that approval from council before going away and spending essentially a year writing the actual bylaw. from our experience from this phase, I'd say that's kind of a realistic timescale. Since the open house in November, it took us probably at least 2 months, maybe as much as 3, to get the bylaw just for the social uses ready, because there is a lot of detail to be gone into and making sure everything's legally watertight and so on. And so I think that taking a year to write the new land use bylaw is a realistic timeline. We then need to take that draft, complete new land use bylaw out to the public again for engagement. And so that's what takes us into 2026. And then, of course, there's the council submission procedures.
And we have full-time people working on this?
We don't have full-time people working on this. Ms. Molesky and myself roughly spend 50% of our time each on this, and then we get some help here and there from other staff, and then we have engagement consultants working for us as well.
Okay. Last question then to Mr. Brierley. The answer then is no.
It would seem so, yes.
Thank you.
The question I have after hearing some of my colleagues' questions is, if this was to go to this bylaw to go to first reading and passes second, third, and is a new bylaw, that would stop your engagement on the information included in this bylaw, and you'd move on to the next step. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct. So we've been working with our engagement consultant to be ready to launch phase 2 April 19th.
Okay, and if not, you'd continue to take engagement until Q1 of 2026, I take it, when the bylaw would come forward for the full reading. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that would be the end of phase 2 engagement.
Okay, so more engagement. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just so that I'm clear on what's going on today, and whoever can answer this, take me through what the consequences of what we're voting on is today. So if we pass this resolution from Mr. Dodick, then what happens? Or then if we don't pass this, then what happens? Can I get those scenarios? And what does it mean to the people that are working on this project right now?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So if this motion passes and we're directed to push back the social uses changes into the new land use bylaw, then that wouldn't come back to Council until 2026. We expect later in 2026. So essentially, the land use bylaw would stay as it is today with the present rules. As an example of that, the downtown commercial district, we heard a lot of concerns from the downtown stakeholder community that they were seeing a lot of pressure in terms of social uses there at the moment. We listened to that, and this bylaw proposes to keep all the current social uses as discretionary while making them permitted in some other districts, which would help to take some of that pressure off downtown. So we think there would be a good deal of support there from the downtown community once they're aware of this. If the motion passes, then if the motion doesn't pass and this proceeds to a public hearing, then Council, of course, would hear the full public hearing and all the perspectives from different stakeholders. Council, of course, have the opportunity then to direct changes to the bylaw before voting on it. So if there's something Council wasn't comfortable with, they could make changes to that draft bylaw before voting on it.
Okay, maybe just, I'm sure Councillor Dodick will put this on in his debate, but I just, your main concern about going through this, I know there's a lot of variables here that aren't quite clear. Is that what you're kind of getting at about with this what's passed before us?
What I'm getting at? No. What's when I go into the debate, I'm also. There was a misunderstanding on my part, and I suspect it may have been on other councillors' part as well, or maybe just on mine only. The way I saw this unfold was that a report would come back to us regarding some proposed changes to a bylaw with respect to supportive housing, social shelters, and other uses. So at that time, we'd get this report and say, look, we've got, as it turns out in this case, 9 social uses that have been identified by the planning department, but only 2 actually identified in the resolution, with 7 others being under the other related social uses. So what I saw happening is, so using this report saying, oh, there's these 9 things and we want to change a lot of them from discretionary to permitted use. Permitted use means that the person who's been living under a particular zoning requirement now is told no longer will you have a say, essentially, in what is your neighbor, but it's going there because a development officer says it's going there because council has all of a sudden changed a bunch of uses from discretionary to permitted. So I thought it would come before council. We go, okay, we like what you said about shelters. We like what supportive housing, food banks, but all the others go away. So we would then direct them to come back with a bylaw that's very targeted to very specific social uses that we're all in agreement with. Unfortunately, that's what I thought would happen. Okay, that didn't happen. When I went to the meeting of November 8, 2022, and it was an interesting meeting. This resolution came forward. I was given the author or assigned it. I amended it. I used myself to friendly amend to use the word proposed land use bylaw, proposed amendments in the paragraph regarding what should be brought to council. I didn't look at it closely enough. I thought that would be sufficient to go along the route that I thought it was going to go on. It did not. So if you go back to the meeting, you'll see that this resolution is read. Prior to any debate, the mayor says, I have a legal question to ask. Mr. Lowen says, better do it in camera. All of a sudden, we go in camera. We briefly come back for 20 minutes. Nothing happens in that 20 minutes. Then we go back in camera for an hour. Then we come back. Resolution is read again, and I say a few things as to what it's not. Again, I'm listening to it. I'm not as clear as or precise as I should have been, but it passes by a 9-0 vote. Now, I know that if it had said what I thought it said, it would not have got a unanimous vote. So that's what I thought was going to happen. So there's a misunderstanding on my part, and I can, once going to the meeting, I saw what may or may not have happened. So I can't say for sure because there really was no debate on it at all. It was read. After an hour and a half, I come and say, this is what it is not, and it was voted on.
Just one final question, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Just if this passes today, are there any consequences of any ongoing developments that are trying to go through, trying to find federal grants or provincial grants or anything like that? Is there anything that is in jeopardy of being lost with this amendment? If anyone can answer that.
I can refer that question to Ms. Kleisinger.
Thank you very much for the question. So I do have a copy paste from a news release because it's from the federal government and the CMHC, and it's the most appropriate way of kind of sharing what information we have on there. So the short answer is maybe. It might impact. And the reason why it's vague is right now we have an application in for the Housing Accelerator Fund with the federal government. That's a $4 billion across the country competition, essentially. And this is from the CMHC news release. Cities have an important role to play in addressing the housing crisis. In different parts of Canada, permitting processes take too long, and restrictive zoning practices in many cases make it illegal to build the kinds of houses we need to ensure everyone in Canada can afford a place to live. The Housing Accelerator Fund was created to incentivize local governments to implement structural and lasting reforms to increase housing supply. As we continue to assess applications, we will be prioritizing consideration for the communities based on their relative level of ambition and policy choices. And with that, I can say that to date, we have not had any negotiations with CMHC, but we are anticipating that we are one of the municipalities that's next. and they may look at current discussions, funding decision, or policy decisions within the community as to whether the community is ambitious or not. Our application, we felt, is ambitious. It included two initiatives around reducing the social housing barriers, which was contexted around this project that planning is currently undertaking, as well as a second project called Reducing Market Housing Barriers, which was in relation to the Phase 2 projects that is to come. So the initiatives that we propose as part of the Housing Accelerator Fund are directly connected to the initiative of the land use bylaw, and there's a possibility that they implicate each other in terms of the decisions made around them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Question I have, just kind of stemming from the questions just previously asked. I recall that meeting. I went back and watched this video when we received the package here for this meeting, and I know why we went into closed session. And I was just actually asking the city clerk here, as I know I can't speak of the reason why we went in there, but what's come out of this and what's before us now doesn't reflect what my questions were in there and what my concerns were. And so, as Councillor Dodic had mentioned earlier, that not just him, there could be other colleagues of his that may have additional questions as how it was presented and how it was actually perceived. And it's definitely not what I had expected. I wish I could speak those, and I guess my question would be to administration, some of the questions that I would have had in closed, those are closed. There's no way those can come out, because I think that would, in my opinion, I guess that's something council would have to approve, I suppose, right?
I'm looking to Madam Clerk there. I think if council approved that, does it have to be unanimous to approve that? They could come up, but
Yeah, that's exactly it. City Manager Brierly, if council approved the information to be released to the public, it definitely could be.
Yeah. Because, and if we decide to do that or not, I guess I'll listen to some more of the questions that we have, but this is exactly the reason of additional debate. To see, I could dig more into that, because it's what we saw in front of us. I was surprised, and this is why I went back and watched a video when Councillor Dodic had mentioned that it was a 9-0, and I said, well, I know for sure I didn't vote in favor of that. Well, I went back, and yes, I did, but I was expecting it because of some of the questions I had from closed. So I'll hop out there of getting more into debate and pass it on to Councillor Crozan for additional question.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. So another process question. If this motion is defeated, if we move forward and have first reading today, and then that bylaw is defeated on second and third reading, or on second reading, would we not in effect then fall to the, back to what Councillor Dodic is recommending? That it would go for 2 years and just be brought back with the rest of the bylaw in 2 years? Is that the process we'd be seeing if we did go to first reading and it was defeated on second?
That's correct, Councillor. And if Council had any input or direction to give us at that time, we could take that forward into the new land use bylaw as well.
So there's, in a sense, having the first reading, having the discussion at second reading, in effect brings what Councillor Dodic is wanting to do with this motion. It just then also lets us hear from the public.
I'd say that's correct, Councillor. I think that's the process that the public have been expecting through this engagement. And certainly there were a lot of people, as Ms. Mileski mentioned, that already felt a bit of engagement fatigue, but wanted to see some action taken, and I think they would appreciate having the chance to speak to Council.
Okay. How many times have you brought this project forward to governance and talked about where we're going in the process that we're in?
We've brought it to an SBC twice, once in July, a month before we launched this project publicly, and then once in December. Both times we refer to our next step as proposed amendments, because proposed amendments in our world remain proposed until a second or third reading.
And beyond other projects, you actually created a guide that would show this process that you're through and everything that Council also has had access to in the past 2 years?
That's correct. As part of the project launch, we wanted to ensure the public, council, stakeholders had all the resources they needed, and part of that is the project primer. It's a 16-page document that we also create a shorter version that is essentially a project management plan that is public-facing document.
So all of this information that is before us today, you have been bringing us along with the project for the past 18 months.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Higgin.
Councillor Dodek.
Mr. Malcolm, this question is for you. Now, you read a portion of an article, and I just want to get some preliminary facts out of the way first. Right now, anyone, as long as it's a discretionary use, all of the things that we've been talking about, drop-in centers, food banks, group homes, and so on, people could apply for that, for those particular projects. Is that correct?
So as it relates to grant funding, which is probably why my field of expertise here, not to overstep with planning, is that what we have seen through the programs that have been released from both the provincial government and the federal government is they're looking for as close to shovel-ready or risk-mitigated projects as possible. So they are looking for projects that have got their zoning approval and their development permits in place.
Okay. So what you're saying is we can streamline that, make it easier by making something a permitted use, in which case you're giving authority for social uses to a development officer rather than giving that authority, or at least giving the person who might be affected by that, the neighbor, an opportunity to oppose it.
Those funding applications that have those approvals are being looked at more favorably.
Okay. So are you suggesting that the availability or the possibility of granting or grants supersedes potentially the rights of landowners who might be affected by a development that may be subject to the grant?
No, not at all. I think through proper land use bylaw processes and public hearings that whatever decision is made on the grounds of the best thing for the community, and then our stage comes after that. So.
Okay. So a landowner who might be affected by a social use that is a discretionary use and has the opportunity to have input at a public hearing, that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think any of the grant funding, whether it's Housing Accelerator Fund or smaller level grants from other level government, recommend or suggest that that process is skipped in any way.
Okay. But if we do something as a permitted use, that process is in fact skipped. It in fact is gone.
Not if that process is done properly with a public hearing. I would
Okay,
suggest
so
that.
I'm sorry, I'm venturing into, you're talking about grants and I'm talking about permitted and discretionary uses. So you are saying that from a grant point of view, the granting authority is would like people to be engaged, including other landowners. Is that right?
They want to see that more land is made available for these uses, and the means to get there is done in line with the legislation.
Okay, so everyone has an opportunity to be heard, in other words. The affected.
I don't know if that's what the grant funders are looking for. I think the grant funders are looking to build projects. There are other levels of legislation and things to make sure that the proper process is in place.
Okay, but if the proper process, if it's a permitted use, there is no proper process other than going to the development officer. If it's a permitted use, boom, you got it.
And it's that level of acceleration that the grant funders who are looking for the outcome of more housing units or social supportive housing are looking for.
Okay.
Understanding that the prior processes were done in the right way.
All right. But you're not suggesting that the grants are more important than landowners who may have a vested interest?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We see I've got Acting Director of Infrastructure Services, Mr. Jewell, if you have something to say.
I wanted to clarify one of Councillor Croson's questions that Ms. Molesky answered, but it was regarding the stakeholder input and the consequence of not getting, either deferring or not approving. I believe there were 260 stakeholders that are awaiting either a public hearing or a notice from our planning group that this would be deferred. So I just wanted to make that clear. Ross didn't mention the 260 stakeholders, but that's a significant number of people that have contributed as a group, but they're also waiting an answer on the public hearing. One of your questions, Councillor Croson, about if it's deferred or rejected at first reading or second and third reading, it's that would be if you don't give us any input or direction, we would assume the direction is the same into 2026. What we would request would be council gives further and better direction, whether it's deferred or not approved at first reading or second and third reading, because then it would be a denial and we would want further and better direction. So the consequence of deferring this is whether it goes deferral into 2026, or you could let it go to a land use bylaw and reconsider it at second and third reading. Whether it's approved or not is up to council. I just want to make sure we're not in a decision point today on the second and third reading. We will be more importantly. Just want to make that clear.
And I just, I know that Mr. Lowen, Director of Legal Services, is in there. Is this to do with this or particular question we just had?
Your Worship, I'm seeking just the opportunity to present, to discuss permitted versus discretionary versus public hearing and when those might happen in a general sense. There's been a lot of questioning around that, and just to make sure everybody, all the members of council are sort of on a level playing field there. That's what I'm asking to be able to address. So
okay.
If it pleases the chair, I can do that now or at a further time.
No, and that's actually, why don't we get through the questions and questions are done? I think it's important. There may be more questions after, but I do appreciate that. It's something that we definitely need to be looking at. So with that, move on to Councillor Croson.
I find we're not so much debating this motion as actually the bylaw, so we've almost jumped to a second reading of the bylaw, it feels, in some ways. How much does it cost for a rezoning? So if a not-for-profit comes forward, wants to build a supportive housing project, wants to actually, deal with the housing shortage in Lethbridge, brings forward a project, how much does it cost them to bring forward a rezoning to City Council?
Thank you, Councillor. A standard application for rezoning is $5,500. Unless it's in an area redevelopment plan area, then it goes down to, I believe, $2,750.
And if you are, a small not-for-profit who's, like scraping money together, do we return that money if we turn you down at the rezoning?
We do not.
We don't. So they have to gamble $5,500 every time they come to council to try to help solve social issues.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Dodd, oh, you're in and you're out.
Why not?
All right, go ahead.
Okay. As I stated earlier, I had a misapprehension as to what this resolution was, but this bylaw is fairly comprehensive, including 9 separate social uses or thereabouts. Since the bylaw or the proposed bylaw is already written, is it not possible, so for example, if someone has a particular affinity or believes that they have the numbers on council to support changes in some of the social uses identified. So I'll use the example of what's actually named, the two named in the resolution itself. So let's say shelter and supportive housing. And council said, well, just pull out those portions of the bylaw and present it as a first reading and then have a public hearing scheduled on that. Is that not possible? Actually, that's to the city solicitor. That's a legal question more than anything else.
With the bylaw tabled, the best way to accomplish that would be to have the public hearing and make any desired amendments after the public hearing.
No, that's not my question. My question is, can it be done?
It can be done, and it could possibly open the process up to greater challenge.
Okay, but would you not agree with me that if, for example, the motion that I've proposed, if it fails, so a 4-4 vote means it fails, all right? And if that fails, and I call for a question on first reading of the bylaw as presented, that also fails. Would that not be more problematic than, for example, passing the resolution that has been presented?
It would be extraordinarily difficult for administration to divine council's intent if they were to refuse to defer it as per your motion and refuse to consider it as per the subsequent motion.
Thank you.
Well, you know what? You're in the queue. Could you continue with your explanation there, Mr. Lowen? Thank you very much.
It was just, I wanted to make sure that everybody listening had the same understanding with all the discussion and questioning around discretionary versus permitted uses. And to be clear, if a use is designated for a parcel of land, either permitted or discretionary, council, as such, does not see that application. If it's permitted, it's as has been stated, the development officer makes that determination and it goes forward. If it's discretionary, under our bylaw, there are notices that go out, and in effect, the person has the opportunity to appeal that discretionary approval to the Subdivision Development and Appeal Board, and then subsequently to the Court of Appeal if necessary. Where council has a say is in two circumstances. When there's a rezoning, such as what is before you today later on the agenda in first reading, you have to either approve or not approve that rezoning. And for all rezonings, there must be a public hearing so that members of the public who are landowners and whose rights may or may not be affected in the future by the changes to those uses have an opportunity to make representations to the council. Where there's kind of a combination of both that this council will remember from different times are what is called direct control bylaws. A direct control bylaw is sort of a hybrid in the sense that it's a rezoning and therefore requires a public hearing, has people come forward, but it is generally in relation to one parcel or a location parcel, making a use permitted or discretionary on that parcel different than what has gone before. So if there's any questions on that general nomenclature, happy to address them, but council as such isn't intended to be directly involved in the ordinary approvals of uses under land use bylaws that are permitted or discretionary. Your oversight is at that higher level going, what is in the land use bylaw, what is permitted and discretionary in these areas?
Thank you very much for that land use bylaw and explanation 101. Appreciate it very much. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. Since Mr. Lowen, we seem to be getting into some hypotheticals and to some discussion around how zoning works. Having read about communities that don't have zoning, is it not true that they have found other ways to solve some of these? Could not council, for effect, if people are worried about social housing, create a different bylaw that says no social housing can be within so many feet of a school? Or meters of a school. Like, are there not other ways and other mechanisms that council has to address some of those concerns that may not necessarily be through zoning?
Without knowing precisely which communities you're talking about, I won't comment on that, but I would say that generally speaking, whether it's sometimes people are talking about the secondary impacts of things like liquor stores or cannabis stores in in the previous century, when I was a younger person, adult bookstores, and those were the kinds of uses that often occupied a lot of local councils' minds. It would typically be in the regulations of that use in the land use bylaw that those kinds of location requirements would be, like a liquor store cannot be within, for example, 150 meters of a school. That would be the appropriate place to put it. So if those were some of the kinds of things that this council was considering, those would be the kind of amendments that they would propose after hearing the public hearing.
So in general, there are ways of balancing the concerns of the landowners with the more open zoning through those sort of amendments.
The balancing of those rights is what Part 17 of the MGA and the land use bylaw itself is intended to do, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for my colleagues for the wholesome questions and for administration for the responses and responses from my colleagues. With that, I have no further questions, but we will open debate, and I'll turn that time over to Councillor Dodick.
I'll be short on the opening. I will count numbers to see whether or not my closing will be a little bit longer. I started out this by saying I certainly had a misapprehension as to what the original resolution was meant to achieve, and that is my fault. I would have never voted in favor of it had I known that the intent was to put in such a fulsome and comprehensive bylaw that puts in some fairly dramatic changes in terms of changing discretionary uses to permitted uses on a whole host of social uses, including, as I've noted, supervised consumption site, drop-in centers, food banks, group homes, resource centers, soup kitchens, and seniors housing. My initial reaction was to just let the first reading go and call a vote on the first reading and debate that the entire thing be scrapped, because this whole bylaw that's proposed is it's a form of, to me, social engineering to the detriment of landowners who have the rights to rely on their current zoning. I understand the need for zoning with respect to social uses, but we already have that in place with each and every one of the social uses that are contained in this bylaw. It's just that most of them are discretionary uses, which allows landowners or disaffected landowners, whether real or perceived, to be able to oppose it. So like I said, my initial reaction was to vote on it at first reading and, in fact, put an end to it. But then, after discussion with administration, this resolution, which is basically to defer it. Now, I point out that although it was indicated that it might be difficult, although I don't see that difficulty, that if there are some proposed amendments that really resonate with council, that even if this thing is referred to, when it's proposed to be referred to, can be pulled out. So I use the example of shelter and supportive housing. There's nothing that says that we have to do this on an omnibus basis. So I'm asking council to support this resolution, and if you have a passion for some of these other social uses, or the specific social uses, you can pull it forward with respect to that, to make certain things permitted uses. But I ended by again saying nothing in our current land use bylaw prevents anyone from applying for the social uses identified in that bylaw. I appreciate that it might, there's a cost associated with that, and that cost is not recouped if you fail it. But I think that in the interest of landowners who have bought their properties or own their properties with a specific zoning, at least for the time being, we should let them rely on that. and not throw this out as an omnibus bylaw. That's my opening.
Thank you, Councillor Dodick, for your brief opening. Ish. And I'll turn the time over to Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. Generally, when a colleague wishes to have some time to think about something, I will absolutely support that. But a 2.5-year delay is a lot more than we usually request when we want to have some soak time. So I will be voting against this. Zoning to me is absolutely fascinating. We always say a person's home is their castle. And yet we've created this zoning which actually goes against it. It limits what people can do with their land, and we all seem to be okay with it, which is fascinating to me because we say we're completely for freedom and what people can do on their property, and yet we create zoning where everybody can tell you what to do with your property. And so it's kind of this really strange thing. And it absolutely limits, in some cases, what can be built. And one of the things it has limited is our ability to actually solve social problems, to build the social housing that we need, and to ensure that we have the supports there. So it doesn't surprise me at all that communities across North America are facing social issues because we have put zoning in such a way that it makes it so difficult. And I realize that there is a fear and concern around this, but it can be done in a way that takes into consideration the concerns of the homeowners and the needs of the public, and can be done in a way that actually has other mechanisms in there. Zoning isn't the only mechanism. So I think we owe it to our community. We have spent 15 months going out there, talking to them about this. We have moved this ahead. Many of them are expecting this bylaw and this hearing to move forward. I know my colleagues don't want to be seen as a kick-the-can council. We want to be seen as a council that actually solves issues. And I think we have seen work here being done on this so that this bylaw actually has some solutions. Is it perfect? No, but that's what amendments are for when it comes to second and third reading. So I'm hoping my colleagues will not support this, will trust our community, bring that bylaw forward, and have the conversation with them around it.
Thank you, Councillor Crowson. Councillor Palladino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As much as I hate delaying a project of this scope, it's already been on a lengthy timeline as it is, and I think there's a way it can be condensed by simply moving this section, this phase one, into all of the rest of the phases that are upcoming, and deal with it as one big bylaw. I think it's important for council and administration to be on the same page as this, so that's why I think it's important to take a closer look at it. I will support this motion to refer it back to refer first reading to the other three readings. I believe there's an option here for some sort of compromise. Councillor Middleton Hope mentioned maybe rushing it to the end, not rushing it, but moving it up to the end of the term of this council and not burden the next council to do the same. So I will, or to carry on, I will support this.
Thank you. I too will support this resolution. I go back again to, it's tough because I want to speak the question that I had when I went into closed session, but what I can say is that it would not be answered by this, but is my understanding through that process that it would be. So I guess I can say that much, and that a question that I had enclosed. We need to respect neighbors. We need to respect neighborhoods. We need to respect those that moved into areas that didn't expect that there would be a supervised consumption site next door. And I'm really putting it out there as a blatant, but it could be a permitted use as we see, and that's a struggle to me. I would never do that, and I think it's upon us as council to respect the community and understand that if these are permitted uses, that we need to hone in on that, and we need to better set these guidelines in motion, because if you look at what a lot of communities are doing, and I think we should be doing the same, and I'm sure we are in our new areas, is zoning is automatically put into those new areas for items like this. So when someone builds a home, they understand that this is going to be, you may have a as we've heard, a cannabis store or a liquor store here on the corner. We're going to have, these are some of the uses that will be there when you come and build on your lot. So again, it's just something that I think there's the respect and the time frame of more debate is not bad. I've heard already that if we end this now and we pass this motion and then we go to the second and third reading, that's done. That's put aside. Anything about this does not move forward unless we decide to remove that bylaw and put another bylaw in its place. So I think the further engagement as we go through the rest of the land use bylaw could affect this particular part of it, and we would have those discussions together. So I'm in support of bringing it all forward. I do like the idea that my colleagues have mentioned of possibly moving this a little sooner than what the timeline currently is. However, more debate is definitely not bad, and more communication with our citizens is better. So I would definitely support this resolution as it is. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn the time over for a brief closing. Councillor Dodick.
The brief closing is, a mention was made that 260 stakeholders are expecting notice of a public hearing. Now, their voices are not unheard if this public hearing takes place later rather than sooner. So on that, I would call the question.
And by roll call, Madam City Clerk, we'll do a vote.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. Councillor Crowson?
Absolutely against.
Councillor Dodick?
Moderately for.
Councillor Palladino?
I support it.
Councillor Parker? Acting Mayor Middleton Hope?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Campbell?
In favor.
Mayor Higgin?
In favor.
And Councillor Carlson?
More than moderately opposed.
6-2, that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Madam City Clerk, question now I could ask, or we get to that point there. 7.1, what happens with that? If this passes,
So this is passed, so 7.1 is now referred to administration to incorporate it in the bigger review.
Because we do not go through 7.
No.
So I thought, just to make sure that the community does know that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to a 6.2. I have a resolution, an OBM from Acting Mayor Middleton Hope, a lawlessness workshop for mid-sized Alberta cities. 6.2, whereas as resources to manage crime and disorder, lawlessness, housing and homelessness have been provided to Edmonton and Calgary, displacement has occurred, which has increased the demands of our resources in Lethbridge and other mid-sized Alberta cities, often without adequate funding and supports. And whereas some strategies used by several mid-city Alberta cities, including Lethbridge, are making a difference, and we can not only learn from each other, but also advocate together most effectively. And whereas, as a consortium of municipalities representing nearly 700,000 Albertans, mid-sized Alberta cities have an opportunity to develop approaches to address lawlessness issues common to our cities, and whereas an opportunity exists to host a one-day lawlessness workshop in Lethbridge on May 2nd, 2024, in advance of the Alberta Association of Police Governance Conference and Annual General Meeting, will take place May 3rd to 4th in Lethbridge. And whereas the purpose of a lawlessness workshop would be to discuss challenges and best practices and to develop a framework to lobby the government of Alberta to work with mid-sized Alberta cities on resourcing issues, federal crown prosecutions of drug offenses, and provincial prosecution services to improve, show cause, and reinforce the detention of violent criminals. And therefore be it resolved that the City Council approve a one-day lawlessness workshop to be hosted in Lethbridge and authorize the Mayor to extend invitations to delegations from other mid-sized Alberta cities to attend, and further be resolved that the City Manager be directed to provide administrative support for the planning, coordination, and hosting of the event, the preparation and delivery of a short presentation to event delegates, and the facilitation of breakout sessions during the event, and further be resolved that Council approve up to $2,500 from Mayor and Council's operating budget allocation for costs related to hosting the event. Open it up for questions. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. I'm not sure who can answer this because it's one of those things where I'm not sure if this is public knowledge yet. But is there anything similar to this being planned already in Lethbridge that any members of administration are aware of? Because this is the difficulty I have. I have information that may be closed session at a committee level, and I'm not sure if it is or isn't.
Nothing I could say publicly
Yeah.
in
So
camera,
that might
maybe,
be,
yeah.
we may have to go in closed to have my question answered.
All right, I would ask for a motion to go in closed by Councillor Croson. All in favor? We'll have to ask those in the gallery to step up just until we're finished the closed meeting. Thank you. All right, we will continue with motion 6.2, where we had left off. And I see no further questions in the queue, so I'll turn it over to debate and Acting Mayor Middleton Hope, if you can open debate. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, Councillor Carlson, you have a question.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before we went in camera, I was just going to ask about a possible referral or discussion with the Police Commission on this. It seems to be their bailiwick rather than ours. So I guess the question is to the mover is would he entertain referring this to Police Commission for their examination?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess my question is, this really isn't in council's court. I see that it's tied in with the Alberta Association of Police Governance, which is police commissions.
Actually,
No.
It's not?
no.
What?
No,
Why
this
does
is
it
this
say-
is on this is the day before, because there's going to be community members that are down for it. So to get the elected
Yeah.
officials and stuff down that we're speaking about, this
You
they
mean the
will be
members-
down, and policing will be down from other communities. But you've got everybody there, and you're talking about the lawlessness.
But can I ask, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
The attendees to those conferences are police governance.
Correct. It's not part of AAPG. This is just the day before.
But the reason was to talk with police governance associations, like the police commissions. So that's why I'm curious why council is talking about this and not our police governance.
Okay, it's
The
not my
commission.
reso. Let me let council.
Okay, thank you.
Largely, Councillor Carlson, because it is important from an advocacy perspective that we take the lead on this. As you're well aware, we brought this to a number of mayors and their members that they brought to the Alberta municipalities this fall. We had conversations with them. This is a municipal government-led initiative. There will be police, there will be commissions, there will be administration that will be invited to attend, but this is an advocacy government, municipal government initiative. Any other questions?
All right. So as you've got that mic still, if you want to open debate.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, question from Councillor Crowson.
Question to the city manager or Mr. Matthews. We know it's going to cost $2,500 of council's operating budget. How much will it cost from administrative support? Just so we have budget numbers.
Great question. That's actually what I was just over talking to Ms. Kleisinger about and trying to determine. I don't have an exact handle on this. If I understand correctly, and Councillor Middleton Hope can correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was interest from the general manager from Ms. Kleisinger's group attending this, and beyond that, I don't have Andrew Malcolm. I don't have a great handle on anything else.
So it's not your staff planning it, or who's planning it?
So I'll look to Mr. Hillier. I think has had some discussions in that regard for more details.
I think the planning to this point has been very preliminary, so I don't, to city manager's comments, I wouldn't have any firm numbers to share today.
Okay, so we would be only approving the 2,500, and if this moves ahead, without knowing how much other funding is going into it? That's, yeah. So generally.
Yes, I'm not aware of, so if I understand this correctly, and I'll look to Mr. Hillier if I have it, if it was held in an outside facility, so that facility staff would be responsible for a lot of the things, including the coordinating and any provision of any services, and we would have potentially one staff member, or general manager, as long as the director of community services approves, that might present on one topic if she agrees. And other than that, I don't know of any other requirements for city staff.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Higgin.
Sorry, just to add to that, so the $2,500 is, again, based on the research that we've done, would cover facility rentals, lunch for the day, things like that. Any administrative costs would be more so staff time, so those attending and planning things.
Thank you. So to open debate, Councillor Middleton Hope.
Just to,
I had another question.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Carlson.
Sorry, because thank you, Mr. Mayor. I couldn't quite figure it out from that. The resolution does direct the city manager to provide all the administrative support for the planning, coordination, and hosting, preparation and delivering of a short presentation. I've hosted conferences before. That could be expensive, especially with some of the salaries that may go into that. So can we put any parameters around that? Or is it just if it costs 50 grand of staff time, it costs 50 grand of staff time? If it costs $8, it costs $8. I'm not comfortable putting my hand up with a blank check. So are there some parameters around that?
Mr. City Manager, 50,000. You looked a little concerned when that number came out.
Well, I would be. How about $8? I also said that, but you didn't want to highlight that part, hey?
Yeah, I can say I'd looked at Mr. Hillier. I didn't have a good feel for any costs or facilitation or any other. I didn't know much beyond Mr. Malcolm potentially speaking for an hour at it. So I'm happy to report back, or happy to however council wishes to proceed.
Yeah, I mean, I would think the upper limits on this would be, 2 staff for the day. And I'm saying that would be the upper limit. I don't think we'd have 2 staff there the entire day, but no, that would be.
Are they paid any, sorry, I should have the mic on. Are they going to be paid any additional dollars, or is that just part of their job?
It would be during regular business hours.
Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you. I just would like to make a comment in regards to the 2 questions from Councillors Carlson and Crowson. Since when do we consider the soft cost dollars of the employees that we pay to do the work of not only council but administration, since when do we include that in all of our discussions around whether or not we approve a project or whether or not we approve moving forward on a seminar or a workshop like this? This is cherry picking, and I object to it.
No, thank you, Acting Mayor. I appreciate that, because I actually make it a point, as you've noticed and I've said quite often, to always check with the city manager about capacity and cost. I've always asked those questions. So if you're saying I'm cherry picking just because it's your resolution this time, if you read back the minutes, you'll notice that I ask these questions about capacity and staff time and costs every single time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson and Acting Mayor Middleton Hope. Let's move along, please. Acting Mayor Middleton Hope to open debate.
Thank you. So I'll read my statement in regards to opening of debate, which will actually form both my opening and closing. And it'll provide a little bit of background so that those that are not familiar with what we've been doing on this particular project are more up to speed. First, I would like to provide some definition and context. I'll be using the term lawlessness because this has caused some concern or some confusion in some council members' minds in the past. It is defined as a state of disorder due to a disregard of the law. These behaviors include criminal, uncontrolled, and antisocial behaviors that have a sustained and pervasive impact on communities. This is a term that is widely used by numerous cities and municipalities across this country to describe the condition of their downtown cores. This is not a made in Lethbridge term. The second is mid-sized Alberta cities. The workshop is directed at 8 largest mid-sized cities in Alberta with a population over 50,000 each, with a combined aggregate populace of over 700,000 citizens. These cities were selected as they are frequently most impacted by displacement of problems from the larger centers without sufficient input, into provincial solutions or resources to effectively address these issues. Several months ago, I represented the City of Lethbridge as Deputy Mayor at the Alberta Municipalities in Edmonton. At that meeting, Mr. Brian Hancock and I arranged to meet with 5 of the 8 mayors and some of their staff members to discuss if there may be an appetite to bring our mid-sized cities together for the purposes of a one-day workshop. The response was unanimously positive, and the mayors we met with expressed excitement over the opportunity of working with their peers and gratitude that we have taken the lead on coordinating the group discussions. The workshop would be an opportunity to share successes and challenges through presentations dealing with lawless behaviors that we have all been contending with. The proposed format would also provide each city with time to talk about their experiences and learn from each other in breakout sessions. Minister Mike Ellis, Public Safety and Emergency Services, will be invited to close out the day and to briefly discuss how our block of cities is able to work effectively with the Government of Alberta on these very complex issues. The timing of the workshop coincides with the Alberta Association of Police Governance meeting, and we encourage representation from council, police commissions, and administration from each city to attend. This is another example of how we are endeavoring to make a difference in the lives of our citizens. These are big city problems, and it is essential that we, as our community's advocates, show leadership in working with businesses and public safety within the city and our counterparts across this province to make a difference. I look forward to my colleagues' support on this important initiative. Thank you.
Thank you for the opening, Acting Mayor. Turn the time over now to Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Higgin. Thank you to my colleague for bringing this forward. I will be supporting it. I'm incredibly sad we didn't move forward on actually solving the long-term solutions by moving the social land use bylaw forward and actually bringing the solutions that will, help our community for 100 years. But for the short term, something like this will be an interesting discussion, and I will be supporting this.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. With that, to close. Okay. Open and closing done. Question's been called. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Next, I have a resolution from Councillor Crowson, Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta, FRIAA, grant application for wildfire preparedness plan. 10.1, be it resolved the City Council approve the submission of planning application to the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta, FRIAA, for a fire start grant of $50,000 to fund the wildfire preparedness plan, and further be resolved that conditional upon receiving the above referenced grant funding, City Council approve expenditures of $50,000 to complete the wildfire preparedness plan. Councillor Crow, I'll open up for questions. I do have a question for administration. This $50,000 is, it sounds like that we could be receiving this grant funding anyways. Is that correct? It's just to get it started prior? We've been told we'd receive it?
We have applied for the grant, but as per the grant application required a motion from council in support of the program. So we're just asking for that. And then if we are successful, that we're able to use that money, that you approve that.
So if we are successful, then we'd put the 50, so we don't put the 50,000, it's conditional, the word conditional. Thank you. No further questions. It pops in and out. Councillor Crowson to open debate.
Thank you. Thank you to the staff who've been waiting around over an hour and a half for what I'm hoping will be one of the easiest decisions we make today. So essentially, as has been noted, they are requesting permission to apply for the money, and if we get the money, spend the money. And the money would be spent on creating a wildfire preparedness plan. Of course, we know we're in the middle of a drought. We know wildfires are something that we need to be concerned about. And this would make sure that we have the planning done as the plan, wildfire preparedness plan is created. So I'm hoping my colleagues will support this, and fingers crossed we get the grant.
And to continue debate, Councillor Carlson.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I did have my hand up for questions. It may be moot. It just a quick, if Councillor Crowson or yourself will permit me a quick question about the funding.
Absolutely, as long as you ask how much staff time will go into this.
Well, I'm hoping the funding will cover that, which is what is my assumption, and I'm hoping that that's not wrong, because we're not approving any of our dollars. This is approving to spend a grant. Available funds were $200,000, and is there a reason we only need 50,000 of the 200,000? I'm just wondering, the 200,000 was made available. We're only asking for 50. Maybe I misunderstood.
Not sure if Mr. Matthews or the chief can answer that.
Through to you, Councillor Crowson, and I'm looking back at the chief to make sure if I say this is wrong, but that's a total amount for the grant program. So what was applied for was the $50,000 which we received, and I'm just going to see if I get a nod. Nope, I got that wrong. So they're going to come up and they can
Actually,
speak.
Chief, if you wanted to, or Chief, or your designate, if you wanted to pop up there to the mic. And we'll put this one live here, the sitting one here, if that's. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Kevin McEwen, who's been leading this grant. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and through to Councillor Carlson. We did only apply for the $50,000. That is the estimated cost to produce the wildfire preparedness plan and guide that we're looking to create. So although up to $200,000 is available to be applied for, we only require estimated to be $50,000 to complete the plan. That $50,000, just the further point, is just the grant money. There is no funds being asked for from City Council or additional budget. And yeah, that's, I believe, answers your question. I hope.
And thank you. So you didn't want to ask for more than we actually needed. And all of that will be going to fund a consultant, I assume?
Yes, correct. We're going to hire a consultant to do this work for us. We've been successful in the past with other forest resource improvement grant funding opportunities, and we have hired consultants in the past to conduct this work, so we'll be looking to do the same again.
Okay, and thank you. And just out of curiosity, because this is funded from the I can't remember what it's called, the Forest Resource.
Improvement Association of Alberta.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, so most of Lethbridge is surrounded by grasslands, so they're okay with us calling that a forest?
Absolutely. So, yes, these grants are open to municipalities that are outside of the forest protection area, and we have been successful in the past for these funding opportunities, and we are also supported from FRIA directly to apply for this.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I do have is it a question, Councillor Midland? Oh, Acting Mayor, okay, go ahead.
So this is through the city manager to the chief or deputy chief. Just for my edification, I've only scanned through this, so I haven't done a deep dive on it yet. One of the concerns in regards to wildfire or fires that are completely out of control is the west side of the city. We have had a wildfire, at least one, that was completely out of control until you got it under control. So I presume that this is a comprehensive assessment. It's going to be a planning process. Are we going to include the viability of a fire mitigation for the west side, including fire breaks?
Well, thank you for that question. Yeah, this plan will look at what we have what we've recently purchased, or I guess in 2017, we did an analysis on what our risks were, and that was attached as a third document. And so this plan is actually addressing point number 8 in that document, where it talks about the wildland, identifying the risks and coming up with some mitigation strategies on that. So this will speak specifically to that. As far as, and I'd have to look about breaks into that 2017 document, but I don't believe it actually talks about breaks. We have talked about looking at some funding opportunities in the past about looking at fire breaks, specifically on the west side of the city. This one is not about that at this time.
Okay, so this won't be included in the assessment, in the evaluation, or the research that's done?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, will that be done in the future?
We hope so, yeah. It's certainly one of the things on our radars. We look at, that is really a big item that will actually talk about building codes and development. So it's a bigger process throughout the city. So we have started those conversations to look at how we could develop our city with these things, with these breaks built in and planned for in the future.
Good, and it won't be lost in the process?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodick.
I was mayor when that last wildfire happened, and there was a state of local emergency, and the operations center at fire station number 1. So this consultant that you'll be dealing with, it'll be all encompassing. It'll include also the operations at the operations center in terms of how to make sure the proper resources go where they're supposed to, whether it be fire, ambulance, police, and of course I remember helicopters were involved in terms of fire suppression, things of that nature. So it's an all-encompassing plan, essentially.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Dodick. This plan is going to have a greater focus on fire response versus the emergency management and the emergency coordination center, as you speak of. So part of the wildfire plan that we're looking to create, it's almost a tactical level document. So part 2, what Acting Mayor Middleton Hope was concerned about, protecting the west side. So part of this plan, based on a risk assessment of the highest at-risk values throughout the city and on the west side, it's going to show us what equipment we need and what equipment we have today, what we can do to protect those facilities. So when we have a large fire like that, and this ties into your question, if we have agencies coming from Lethbridge County, Coaldale, Colehurst, we have this plan and we can show them exactly where those values at risk are, how many lengths of hose they need, how many pumps they need. They can take that plan and go set that structure protection up. So that is part of the plan, but not from the Emergency Operations Center side.
Okay, thank you.
And no further questions, so to open debate, Councillor Crowson.
Thank you. I thought I sort of had already. But yes, if you look at 8.3, it's like whether or not you need an ATV, things like that, what sort of mechanisms you need to be able to fight wildfires. This is what this plan will be looking into. And I have no doubt after the plan, they'll probably be coming back with some capital requests and things like that might be possible. So that sort of thing happens in advance of budgets, but this will make sure we have the best possible plan for wildfires. Wildfire season is already upon us, and what we can do, spend this money wisely and get this plan done, so I hope my colleagues will support this.
I take that as your opening and closing.
Yes.
All right, question's been called, all in favor? And that is unanimous, thank you. Next, we'll move on to any city council updates. Seeing none, we'll move on to closed meeting reports, and I have a resolution from Councillor Parker closed meeting omnibus closed motion, 14.3, 14.4, and 14.5. Be it resolved, the City Council direct the closed meeting discussion with respect to Lethbridge and District Exhibition, verbal, shelter update, verbal, and Federation of Canadian Municipalities 2024 conference, verbal, remain confidential pursuant to Section 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Councillor Parker. Question's been called. All in favor? And that is... Oh, Councillor Carlson, I am sorry. You had a question on this?
It was just on the in-camera reports in general, so we could... that vote, I think, carried, and we're fine to move on, but I do have a question.
Okay, I will entertain your question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, maybe we just have to make an amendment, or maybe it's coming forward shortly, but we did go in closed session to talk about Acting Mayor Middleton Hope's resolution. I was wondering if we should have Ms. Hilford have added to that resolution and further that the in-camera discussion remain confidential.
Yes.
I think it,
that is in here. City Council directed closed meeting discussions remain confidential. That was part of the resolution added at the end. All right.
Oh, it was added at the end. I didn't see it added, so I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. And with that, well, my goodness, we are adjourned at 3:25.